Hello, everybody. So thank you so much, Georgia, for bringing this wonderful film to all of us, bringing, I think, the world community all together and through the medium of film and bringing us all together here in this room. Um, to open the Q&A with my wonderful director, Georgia, and we have Jill Pearce, as we were told, we're very lucky to have here, whose career spans over 40 years and through the medium of sound healing. But I thought to open the Q&A, I thought, given the nature of what we've just witnessed, I'm sure we should all begin to arrive here now in this room. So I thought we'd open the Q&A together by just doing a very short meditation and chant together. So I'm sure, I hope your minds are rushing ahead, thinking of many questions to ask these lovely ladies. But you might also be thinking that you might be hungry. What am I going to have for dinner? Where am I going? And not actually being present here in this room. So if we'd all like to just sit in a comfortable position. So get comfortable in your chairs and just get any fidgeting and any adjustments, what I call unnecessary movements, out of the way. Fidgeting is just a waste of your energy. So make any last movements, and in your own time, just gently begin to close your eyes. Close your eyes, and with your internal gaze focused in between your two eyes, just watch that space. Take an inhale and an exhale. With your internal gaze just gently pointing downwards to the tip of your nose, this helps you drop any fidgeting and any unnecessary movement you might still be making in your mind. When we close our eyes, we go from expelling all our energy outwards to turning our energy inwards. When we close our eyes, we find we're met with our own presence. I am. Place your hands in Namaskar in front of your chest if you like, or you can keep them where they are. And together we'll chant 3 Om. Inhale. And in your own time, you can gently begin to open your eyes. Are we all here now? So, yeah. Thank you, Georgia, for that beautiful film and for bringing this to us. I think it's very interesting because I do teach yoga and I like to use chanting. When I teach, I like to combine asana, pranayama, meditation, but especially mantra. Mantra is very important to me. And I find people are very reluctant and very shy to chant, and people that come regularly have begun to get used to the chanting and the mantras, and I think that's a theme that comes up in this film. My first sort of exposure of really beginning to understand Om was when I traveled to India and was thrown in a room and told to chant it for half an hour solid. And I came out completely vibrating and I was like, I've become Om. I just was resonating completely. So, I mean, I wanted to know your first experience with mantra and chanting. And if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was actually more through the music that from some of the artists that we saw in the film. It was it's about 10, 11 years ago. I was just looking for a bit more peace and quiet, and I went to a meditation Reiki kind of course weekend, and I was listening a lot to Lama Gyome, who you met in the film, and Deva Prema Miten.
Mm.
And around the same time, a very close friend of mine got diagnosed with cancer, and I kind of accompanied her through these 5 years until she eventually passed. And during this time, this music became extremely important to me. I mean, this really helped me support her. Like, she herself wasn't listening to it, but I was just on me all the time. I don't know, it just really helped me to get through it. It kind of gave me the feeling it's all not so bad. There's not such a separation between life and death. That's the feeling that gave me, and that really helped me get through that phase. She was my age, she went way too early. And so after making all that profound experience with the music, I started listening to mantra, and of course the mantras kept coming back in my mind, and I can continue saying why I then wanted to make the film, but I don't know if that's the next question.
Yeah, I think the next question was, I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting because this is a film, the difference being, it is your chosen path of work, but this is obviously a very heart-centered piece of work. So that moment, when was the moment that you decided, I have to make this into a film? Yeah.
Well, I also work as a film editor already for 25 years before I actually got to know the music, and I'd worked on a couple of music documentaries, music films, videos. So the love for that was already there. And then I'd just continue working as an editor on other projects, but every time I'd be like selecting the footage, I'd always be listening to mantra and be listening to that music. And then the urge just came. I really actually would love to make a film about this music. And it took a little while until I dared take that step, because I've been editing for a long time. I produced another film before, but this was the first one for directing and producing. But it was just, I just knew I just have to do it, So.
I was really excited to see it on the bill this year because Dock and Roll Festival, obviously being a music documentary festival, when Vanessa and Colin, the owners of the festival, told me this film was on the bill this year. For me, this is it. This is the source. This is where it all comes from, and I think it was a nice bold choice on their part. So, so it's nice that you had that background in music documentaries. And what do you find the difference was between regular music documentaries and this one, if any? Was there anything distinct that you noticed?
Music always will transport you somewhere, somehow or the other, no? But this really, I think, is just more inwards for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know, music can express all these types of moods, but this was really an inward, expression journey. I don't know.
Yeah. Was there any moments making this film that, because even though it's a heart-centered piece of work, sometimes work is work. Was there any stressful moments, or, did mantra help you get through that?
Find time to chant quickly. Before I go to sleep, like, I've got another 20 now. No, of course it was extremely hard, but because it was a passion project, I started out on it. I really wanted to make it, and nothing is, if it's your passion, then of course nothing gets too hard, although it has been it's been a long journey. It's been like 6 years in making, finding financing being one of the most difficult ones, and then having all coming together, all the legalities, all these things that I normally don't have to deal with when I'm just editing. But it's beautiful. I'd never look back. I'm very happy for all the people I've met and responses we're getting now as well, because the film's been released in many different countries already, and it's
it's amazing. It's and we'll come back to you, but moving on to Jill, and how your life's work started. So it's very interesting because when you look at the etymology of words, I can never say that word correctly. You talk about being sound in body and mind, and it's very interesting being sound in your being, sound, being the nature of everything in this existence, and you've got very acute understanding of the vibrational nature of existence and reality. But I'm actually from Ireland, and what I find really interesting is sound has actually moved into the slang, sort of a slang word in Ireland. If somebody is very well in their heart and mind, you say they're a sound person. That just came to my head when I was looking at sort of your history and how you came about. And for want of a better word, there's a very enchanting story of your first exposure to to chanting, which was actually on the west of Ireland, I believe, in a boat. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, well, I was a very young child, and my father was extremely eccentric. And one night, he decided to take us on a boat to a remote island off the west coast of Ireland when everybody else was either in bed or going to bed. And so the only other people in the boat, apart from my brother and I and my mother and father, were three old women going home dressed in black at the back of the boat. And so off we set. And immediately a storm came up, a really violent storm, and it was very obvious to all of us we were going to drown, and I was terrified. We were all completely terrified. And then all of a sudden, these three women in the back of the boat began a kind of wailing chant, which made the hairs on the back of our neck stand up. And in that moment, our terror became a kind of ecstasy. It became a blissfulness, and the wind subsided and the storm abated, and we arrived in a state of complete ecstasy. So this was the first transmission that I received of the power of sound to transform one thing into another, not just the elements, not just our emotions, but both.
Yeah, which is very interesting. So could you tell us exactly how the power of chanting, and particularly the voice, and healing, and how it all works? All of it. Have you got time, everyone? In a nutshell. I guess I think one theme that really comes up is, and it's something actually one of the women, the American women at the beginning of the film, talks about judgment. And I think it's really interesting because you also talk about when you name something and our perceptions. So whenever you name and judge something, there seems to be a closing off of possibilities. I always talk about when you come into a yogic practice, you come into a sacred place of non-judgment, and I think that's it.
So naming is the way that we feel safe in the world. We give everything names so that we know that it won't explode because we knew it before and we survived. And the main thing in life is living beings is how we remain living. And traditionally we remained living by chanting to the divine source who held our continued living in their hands as a way of praising, because it's polite. You praise first, then you ask favors. You're great, you're wonderful, please help the rain to fall and my crops to grow and my children to pass the exam. So praise first, then praise petition, and then participation on a more sophisticated level. You become the sound itself. And going back to what you said about sound, sound means to be healthy and it means to be true. And these are synonymous notions in our language, and our language tells us much more than we thought we knew. And so sound is very fundamental. And I think one of the key things about sound and chant is that you can only chant in the present. Mm-hmm. And but you can chant in the present and you can still think about what you forgot to do and what you therefore have to do, which is the cycle of anxiety that is what keeps us in a paralytic state. But if you, at the same time that you're chanting, you listen to the sound that you're making while you're making it, so you create a circuit of attention, then it's very difficult to think about what you forgot to, your regrets and dreads, which is this line of anxiety. So the key thing is, while chanting in the present, to listen to yourself chanting in the present so that you can then be in the present, where all is revealed, all is known, and it's the only reality there is.
Talking about chanting in the present and creating the circuit of attention, there's an interview I saw where you talked about the subject and the object. So the object being the chant and the subject being the listening. And it's interesting because when you have two opposing forces coming into parallel, you get a third force. And I guess that's where the being centered then comes from, as such.
Well, going back to this question of naming that you mentioned, I mean, we name everything outside of us to feel safe, as I mentioned, and and then the more names we have for things, the more we feel safe, and yet the more there is that's constellated, and the more there is that's outside of us, and the more we are separate. And the whole point of all spiritual practice is to overcome separation and to be aware that we are separate. And so if I name something other than me, then I either want it because I like it and I want more and more of it and can't have it, or I have it, I'm lumbered with it, and I don't want it, and so I push it away. And so we're in a state of what the Tibetans call aversion and attachment, which are the result of ignorance, which is ignoring what is, which is that there is no separation, and we really know, but we know there isn't, but we act as if there is. And so this gives rise to all of our problems.
Yeah.
And so sound allows us to overcome this separation, because every form has its own sound, and it's the sound of a thing which is the key to its own dissolution. So it allows us to dissolve the boundaries between us, between the boundaries between us and the outside world, and it allows us to create community, and
Exactly.
which we saw so
Yeah.
elegantly in this
Yeah.
film, so beautifully.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think probably a lot of people's primary experience is very personal, and they find mantra for themselves in the chant, and then it seems that it opens them up, their heart, and it opens up to a community, and then suddenly you find yourself in a kirtan. And I think for me, watching the film, one of the most touching moments was in the prisons, seeing these men that are cut off from society as such, and finding that freedom and space within them, as we were told, in a cell, and having that recognition was very beautiful to see, and I think it was when he was talking about his little dance, and and there's just something, this power comes over. It was very interesting, because as I arrived in the Barbican, I told you there was something I wanted to tell you. I think, again, another recurring theme we see in the film is this word freedom, and the power that chanting a mantra gives as freedom. And I know that it's a tool that I think a lot of people find everything happens to them, and through personal experience, I think mantra and chanting gives people the tool to find that they can have the control factor, and then the outside falls into place. But there was a small child just singing with headphones on, "I can sing a rainbow," as I walked in. And I know you've talked about the rainbow colours and sound, so if you could just quickly explain a bit.
One of the things that when I started this, which was an embarrassingly long time ago, as you hinted, I realized that we had gone silent. The more sophisticated we become as a society, the more silent we become, and all the ways we had, which I say in the film, of have chanting together have been eroded by our society. And so I was really looking for a way of reintroducing the voice into our society, which didn't involve words, because words are very specific, and they're cultural, and I wanted something which really harnessed the power of sound, but without the limitations and separations that come along with culture. And so I came across a form of chanting in Central Asia called variously overtone chanting, harmonic singing, and it's a way of chanting on a single note. But by amplifying the different resonant cavities, you're able to make audible the harmonics, which were known in music as always being present, but usually they're not audible. They just give you the information of what the source of the sound is. They tell you whether it's your grandmother or your mother or whatever instrument it is. And these sounds are normally inaudible, but this is a way of chanting where you can amplify them so you can hear them. And this exists only in Tibet, Mongolia, Tuva, and also it was sort of rediscovered by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who I was living and working with in 1971-74. So I received a kind of transmission of this form of chanting both through the Western musical art transmission by somebody who'd created electronic music. It didn't exist before him. He did it by sticking bits of tape together with sellotape. And also from Tibetans, because I was studying with Tibetans very early on, and particularly the chant master of the Gyuto Tibetan college, and who's one of the main ones that does this form of chanting. So I was very interested in a way of chanting which has no words, because there's a problem with words. And so I started introducing this form of chanting as a way of allowing people to rediscover the power of their own voice, because you don't need an extra seat on the plane for your voice. You have it with you. We are our own instrument, and usually and largely unplayed. And so this is where I started. I started with teaching this form of chanting. And so coming back to the rainbows, maybe I should demonstrate it really. And
I was just about to say, we're very lucky to have this moment. If you've not heard it before, you can see it now. Hear
so
it.
I'll sort of try and do it, and then I'll explain the rainbow bit. I don't know. I can't tell from the acoustic whether you could hear other notes. So the rainbow analogy is a very good way of describing what is going on, which is so when we see a rainbow, we know that there's white light, and it's been refracted through a raindrop or a crystal, which allows us to see its component and constituent parts, which are the rainbow colors. And so it's the same with the voice. So I'm chanting on a single note, but I'm putting it through a kind of filter, which is filtering out the sounds from that one sound, the white light, as it were, so that you can hear the rainbow colors of the sound, which are always there, but normally we don't hear them, just as the rainbow colors are always there, but we don't see them.
I think, yes, thank you. That was marvelous. Yeah. Just before we open up the questions to the audience, okay. Okay. So thank you for that demonstration, and thank you for bringing us all together. But is there any questions from the audience?
We have to finish there. I'm very sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, could we have one? Could we just have one or two questions?
So I would like to just say, because I always forget to say, but if anybody wants to learn this, I'm actually giving a workshop in December 1st and 2nd, and if anybody wants to come and learn it, you could look at my website, healingvoice.com, and come and join us, because it is very magical.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know. I know.